It was a betrayal so profound it shattered the very foundation of my life. I had walked into my daughter's gleaming corporate office expecting to offer a mother's support, only for one of her colleagues to grab my arm, his eyes wide with fear, whispering a warning that saved me from ruin. "Don't sign a single thing. Just run." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I barely managed to slip out through a back exit, and within 5 minutes, my phone screen was alight with 37 frantic, missed calls. The evening had begun in quiet solitude until my front door was thrown open with such force it seemed to explode from its hinges. My daughter Amelia stumbled through the doorway, her face a ghastly, chalky white. In her trembling hands, she clutched a sheaf of crumpled papers that shook as if caught in a gale. The porcelain teacup I was holding slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, shattering into 100 pieces on the hardwood floor. "Mom, it's all over," she gasped. The FBI could be here any second. Documents cascaded from her hands, scattering across my coffee table like dead leaves in a hurricane. Bank statements, stern legal notices, columns of numbers bleeding an aggressive red across the crisp white pages. Amelia's designer suit, usually immaculate, was deeply wrinkled, and her normally perfect blonde hair was a disheveled mess. She looked like a woman being pursued by ghosts. "Slow down, sweetheart," I said, setting my newspaper aside and reaching a hand toward her. "Tell me what's happened." Her voice cracked as she spoke the number. 2.3 million. We owe $2.3 million. The figure struck me with the force of a physical blow. I watched my daughter pace the length of my modest living room, a caged animal in a space she had long outgrown. The sharp click of her Italian leather heels on the old oak floors echoed the frantic rhythm of my own heart. The warm, inviting lamplight that usually made the room feel so cozy now cast long, harsh shadows across her gaunt, strained features. "The charges," Amelia choked out, pulling another paper from her jacket pocket. Her hands were shaking so violently that the words on the page blurred into an indecipherable mess. Wire fraud with client data, money laundering through shell companies, federal financial law violations, securities fraud, tax evasion, RICO conspiracy charges, computer fraud, and abuse. Each accusation landed like a death sentence, each word heavier than the last. Amelia's voice dwindled with every charge she listed, until she was barely whispering the final words into the stunned silence of the room. The loud, rhythmic ticking of the old mantel clock was the only sound that dared to break the stillness. "Sweetheart, you'll figure this out," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "You always find a way. Handle this?" Amelia spun to face me, her eyes wild with a desperation I had never seen before. "Mom, they have everything. Bank records, email chains, even our encrypted communications. They've been watching us for months." I reached out to place a comforting hand on her shoulder, the same gesture I had used 1,000 times when she was a small, frightened girl. Amelia violently knocked my hand away, the force of it making me stumble backward. "I need you to help with actions, not with your empty words. I don't understand these financial schemes of yours," I confessed, my voice trembling slightly. "I can't help with any of this." "Of course you can't," she sneered, and her laugh was a bitter, hollow sound that chilled me to the bone. "While I was out there building an empire, you were sitting here reading your newspapers and drinking your tea. While I was making millions, you were content to live in this museum." The words stung more than any slap ever could. I glanced around my home, at the worn leather armchair where I'd read her bedtime stories, at the cherished family photos on the mantelpiece capturing happier times, at the floral curtains my late husband had helped me hang 30 years ago. Everything I held dear, Amelia now saw as a monument to failure. "When you were young," I began softly, "I taught you about honesty, integrity, about the importance of doing the right thing. Amelia's voice turned cruel, sharp as broken glass. But honesty doesn't pay the mortgage, Mom. Integrity doesn't buy you respect. And doing the right thing gets you a government pension and a house that's falling apart. Amelia, please, don't say that. She swept the remaining papers from the table with a furious gesture. I needed a mother who understood business, who could help me navigate this world. Instead, I got lectures about character, while my competitors were getting trust funds and corporate connections. The aroma of my now cold coffee filled the tense air between us. Outside, the brutal February wind of a Chicago winter rattled the window panes. Amelia stood in the doorway now, her silhouette starkly framed against the dim light of the hallway. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to fix this myself, she declared, her voice cold and resolute. The same way I've fixed everything else, while you just sat here feeling righteous about your simple little life. The front door slammed shut with a deafening bang, so hard that the family photos on their shelves trembled. Through the window, I watched her BMW speed away, its red taillights vanishing into the oppressive winter darkness, leaving me alone with the evidence of some terrible crime scattered at my feet. I sank back into my armchair, surrounded by the wreckage of what my daughter had become, the sound of her car's engine fading into the ceaseless hum of the Chicago night. My old joints protested as I bent down slowly, my hands shaking as I gathered the scattered papers. Bank statements, legal documents, a sea of numbers that made no sense to my practical, engineer-trained mind. The torn edges of the paper felt sharp and hostile against my calloused fingers. In the kitchen, I started making coffee, more out of ingrained habit than any real desire for it. The familiar, methodical routine measuring the grounds, adding the water, pressing the button, helped to steady my trembling hands. But my mind was stuck replaying the image of Amelia's face, a mask of wild desperation I had never witnessed on her before. When had my daughter become so cruel? What happened to that bright young woman who once dreamed of changing the world? While the coffee percolated, I carried a heavy photo album into my study. Dust motes danced in the beam of the lamplight as I opened it to a page from 2015. There was Amelia at 32, her eyes bright with confidence and optimism, standing proudly beside the door of her very first office. The Data Secure Solutions sign looked enormous next to the tiny rented space behind it. We're going to revolutionize financial data security, Mom, her voice echoed in my memory. Companies lose billions every year to cyber theft. We're going to be their guardians. I could still recall the smell of new carpet and the sound of cardboard boxes being unpacked. Amelia had worked 18-hour days back then, surviving on cheap pizza and sheer determination. My daughter, the entrepreneur, I used to tell my neighbors, my voice swelling with pride. The following photos documented a period of rapid growth. Larger offices, more employees. Amelia featured in business magazines. But somewhere around 2018, a subtle shift occurred. The photos began to change too. There were fewer family gatherings, replaced by more solo shots of Amelia posing with clients whose faces I didn't recognize. The first truly suspicious conversation happened in 2020. Amelia had mentioned an offshore client, some complex deal she claimed was too convoluted to explain. When I pressed for details, she became evasive. You wouldn't understand the complexity, Mom. That expensive watch appeared on her wrist around the same time, and her practical Honda was replaced by the sleek BMW. Designer suits took the place of her off-the-rack shirts. When I had asked about her sudden surge of wealth, Amelia had just smiled and said, "Business is good, Mom. Very good." I flipped to a photo from Christmas 2018, the last holiday that felt truly normal. Amelia looked genuinely happy then, carving the turkey and telling jokes. What had happened to that woman? When did her definition of success become something that would bring the FBI to her door? The images in the album blurred as a wave of exhaustion washed over me. My coffee grew cold on the end table as I sat there, comparing the daughter from my memories with the desperate stranger from tonight. The girl who had once spent hours building intricate model bridges in my basement had become someone who now spoke of honesty as if it were a weakness. Outside, the February wind howled through the bare branches of the trees, and the old house settled with its familiar creaks and groans. I found myself remembering smaller, precious moments. Amelia's college graduation, her first business award, the immense pride shining in her eyes when she'd shown me that initial tiny office. Had I failed her in some fundamental way? Should I have tried harder to understand her world, to support her ambitions more actively? The engineering principles I had taught her, precision, integrity, building things that were meant to last, seemed hopelessly quaint in whatever universe she now inhabited. My head grew heavy, my thoughts thick with sorrow and confusion. The photo album slipped lower on my lap as sleep began to claim me. The last thing I remembered was Amelia's face from that Christmas photo. So young and hopeful. Nothing at all like the frightened, cornered woman who had stormed out of my house just hours before. The shrill ring of the telephone jolted me awake at 8:45 a.m. A sharp pain shot through my neck from having slept slumped in the armchair all night. The photo album slid to the floor with a soft thud as I fumbled my way toward the kitchen, disoriented and confused about the time and place. "Mom, get to the office. Right now." Amelia's voice exploded through the phone. Before I could even manage a hello, I pressed the receiver closer to my ear, still groggy from my uncomfortable night. "What happened? Why are you in such a rush?" "I'll explain when you get here. The driver is already on his way to you." "A driver? Amelia, what is—" "Everything is getting resolved right now," she cut in, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Just trust me, okay? He'll be there in 10 minutes. The line went dead. I stood there, staring at the silent receiver. Amelia's frantic urgency, still echoing in my ear. She had spoken faster than usual, her words tumbling over one another like someone running out of time. In my bedroom, I grabbed clothes quickly, a pair of khakis, a simple button-down shirt, and my warmest jacket. A Chicago February demanded layers. My reflection in the mirror showed an old woman with rumpled hair and worried eyes. Someone who had been pulled into events far beyond her understanding. A thought flickered through my mind. Should I call someone? My old friend, James Peterson, the lawyer. But Amelia had sounded so certain, so desperate for my immediate presence. Whatever was happening, waiting felt like an impossibility. From my front window, I watched the quiet suburban street. Most of my neighbors were already at work. The Hendersons' house across the way stood dark, and the Johnsons' driveway next door was empty. The morning silence of Evanston surrounded me like a cocoon. One I felt I was about to leave forever. A black sedan appeared at the corner, moving with a distinct purpose down my street. It wasn't Amelia's BMW. This car was bigger, more formal, with tinted windows that mirrored the overcast sky. It looked professional, serious, the kind of car that meant a kind of business I didn't understand. The engine's low hum grew louder as it approached, and my stomach tightened with each passing second. Amelia had arranged this overnight, which meant she had been planning whatever was coming while I slept, surrounded by her scattered documents and my fading memories. The car stopped, perfectly aligned with my walkway. There was no honking, no rushing gestures, just a patient, unnerving stillness. Through the tinted windshield, I could barely make out the driver's silhouette. Everything about the moment felt calculated and official, as if I were about to step into a world where old, retired engineers simply didn't belong. I checked my pocket one last time for my wallet and keys. The familiar weight of my house key felt strangely significant, as if I might not be needing it again anytime soon. The thought sent a shard of ice through my veins. At the front door, I paused with my hand on the knob. Amelia's words from last night echoed in my mind. Asterisk. Tomorrow morning, I'll fix this myself. Asterisk. Was this her solution? Some desperate plan that required dragging her own mother into the center of whatever storm she had created? The frigid February air hit my face like a slap the moment I opened the door. Chicago winter did not forgive hesitation. The black sedan waited, engine running, its exhaust visible as a plume of white in the cold air. Professional, anonymous, and as patient as death itself. My feet crunched on the frost-covered walkway. Behind me, my house stood warm and familiar, a repository of 40 years of memories. Ahead waited that mysterious car and whatever resolution Amelia had promised. The distance between my front door and the sedan's rear handle felt like crossing the border into a different world entirely. The cold February air was a shock to my lungs as I stepped outside. The black sedan waited, its engine purring, exhaust clouding the frigid morning air. Before I had a chance to hesitate further, the passenger door swung open from within. The leather seats embraced me with an unexpected warmth as I slid inside. The driver was younger than I had anticipated. He had a military posture, buzzed hair, and eyes that looked like they had seen things mine never would. His nameplate on the dashboard read David Webb. "David, do you know what's happened with the company?" I asked, my voice betraying my anxiety. "Not my business, ma'am," he replied, his voice carrying the crisp efficiency of someone who was just following orders, and nothing more. We pulled away from my quiet suburban street. Evanston's tree-lined roads soon gave way to the busier thoroughfares that led toward the Kennedy Expressway. I tried a different approach. "My daughter, Amelia, seemed pretty shaken up last night. Is the situation really that bad?" David simply adjusted his rearview mirror. "Can't say, ma'am." The highway stretched out before us. Downtown Chicago's formidable skyline, growing larger with each passing mile. Gleaming glass towers caught the pale morning light, reflecting a city that never seemed to sleep. Traffic moved in predictable, flowing patterns around us. A river of commuters heading to jobs I couldn't begin to fathom. Living lives that would intersect briefly with ours before diverging once again. "Have you been working for Amelia for long?" I asked, making one last attempt. "Not long." David merged smoothly into a faster lane of traffic. His hands remained steady at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, as professional and unreadable as a chauffeur in some old black and white movie. I gave up trying to extract any conversation. Through the tinted windows, I watched Chicago transform from quiet residential neighborhoods into bustling commercial districts. The radio played softly, carrying news reports about weather, traffic, and politics that all seemed impossibly distant from the crisis that had gripped my daughter. My watch read 9:15 when downtown's deep canyon of buildings finally swallowed us whole. Pedestrians moved with purpose along the sidewalks, bundled against the biting cold, but undeterred. Steam rose from manholes, creating ethereal geysers in the urban landscape. Everything here felt more urgent, more alive than my quiet Evanston street. The sedan turned onto LaSalle Street, pulling up alongside a towering 40-story glass skyscraper that stretched toward the gray February sky. The fountains in the corporate plaza were frozen solid, their sculptural ice formations catching the light like massive, abstract crystals. Business professionals streamed past in expensive coats, talking into their phones or checking their tablets as they hurried along. "This is it," David announced, parking smoothly in a space that seemed to have been reserved specifically for us. Inside the lobby, polished marble floors gleamed under impossibly high ceilings. A large security desk dominated the center of the space, manned by guards who looked more like former police officers than building staff. Enormous pieces of corporate artwork lined the walls, abstract paintings that probably cost more than my entire annual pension. "Miss Snyder is expecting you in office. 2347, one of the guards said, handing me a visitor badge without even asking for my identification. He already knew who I was. The elevator ascended silently, climbing through the floors of corporate America. Through the glass walls of the elevator car, I glimpsed conference rooms, vast cubicle farms, and private offices with breathtaking panoramic city views. Everything spoke of success, of money moving in ways I had never understood during my entire engineering career. On the 23rd floor, the doors opened onto a sea of gray carpet and sterile fluorescent lighting. Data Secure Solutions logos were emblazoned on glass. Walled offices where people typed intently at their computers, spoke into headsets, and moved with the controlled, buzzing energy of a successful business. Office 2347 was at the end of the corridor. Through the glass wall, I could see Amelia's silhouette, and another man standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows. Their voices carried faintly through the door, urgent and intense, discussing something that made Amelia gesture emphatically. My hand found the cool metal of the door handle. Whatever crisis had brought me here, whatever solution Amelia needed, I was ready to help my daughter, however I could. The door swung open to reveal Amelia mid-sentence, gesturing toward a spread of documents laid out across a large conference table. She spun toward me, her face lighting up with a look of such genuine relief that I felt my own tension begin to ease. "Mom, you're here! You're going to save our company." Amelia rushed forward, embracing me with the unrestrained enthusiasm of a child showing off a perfect report card. Her arms felt strong around my shoulders, and her expensive, familiar cologne filled the air. The desperate, haunted woman from last night had been replaced by someone confident, almost jubilant. "Finally, I can explain what's happening. We'll solve everything right now." She led me toward the conference table, where the documents waited in neat, orderly piles. "Just sign these papers," she said brightly. "It's a simple transfer of shares into your name. It's for tax benefits." The office itself screamed success. A massive mahogany desk, plush leather chairs, and one wall covered in awards that looked like a hunter's trophies. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the entirety of Chicago spread out below us in all directions. Framed articles from business magazines showed Amelia shaking hands with politicians or accepting awards. "Mom, I'd like you to meet Ethan Cole, my business partner." A man standing near the windows turned, extending his hand with a noticeable reluctance. Ethan appeared nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other and deliberately avoiding my gaze. His handshake was cold and distracted. "Miss Snyder," he said, his greeting coming out as strained and overly formal. "Ethan has been helping me restructure the company's finances," Amelia explained. Positioning me at the head of the conference table, documents were fanned out like playing cards. "These papers will protect our family assets, while we resolve some temporary cash flow issues." The legal documents looked intimidatingly official, with corporate letterheads, multiple signature pages, and language so dense with terms I didn't recognize. Amelia had placed expensive pens at strategic intervals, ready for signing. "This all seems a bit complicated for a simple transfer," I remarked, a flicker of unease stirring within me. "Modern business requires modern solutions," Amelia replied with a laugh that, now that I was listening closely, sounded a little forced. "Trust me, Mom. When have I ever steered you wrong?" Near the window, Ethan shifted his weight again and glanced at his watch. Something about his behavior was deeply unsettling. The way he avoided participating in our conversation, the palpable tension in his shoulders, his obvious desire to be anywhere else but in this room. I reached for one of the documents, trying to parse the legal jargon that might as well have been written in Sanskrit. Phrases like nominal director and personal liability jumped out at me, but their context remained entirely unclear. A sharp knock at the door interrupted my reading. A young woman in professional attire, whom I recognized as Amelia's assistant, Chloe Bennett, entered without waiting for permission. "Miss Snyder, you're urgently needed on the phone." Amelia's confident expression flickered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. Can't it wait, Chloe? We're in the middle of something important. It's about the Michigan Avenue situation, Chloe insisted. They said it's immediate. Of course, Amelia said, squeezing my shoulder with an air of paternalistic reassurance. It was the performance of a loving daughter helping her family through a crisis. Mom, just look over the papers. I'll be right back. This won't take long. The door closed behind Amelia and Chloe, their voices fading as they walked down the hallway. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the office felt different, quieter, and far more tense. Ethan remained by the window, but his posture had changed. I could see his reflection in the glass, the image of a man wrestling with a difficult internal decision. I picked up the pen closest to the signature lines. Whatever these documents contained, they were meant to help my daughter navigate her business crisis. After a 40-year career built on engineering precision, signing papers to support my family seemed simple enough, but the pen felt heavier than it should have in my fingers. Just as the tip of the pen touched the paper, Ethan's hand shot out, grabbing my sleeve. "Stop," he urged, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "Don't sign anything. Get out of here now." The urgency in his voice froze the blood in my veins. Documents scattered as I jerked backward, the pen clattering loudly to the floor. "What are you saying?" I stammered, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Your daughter wants to transfer all of the company's debts and criminal responsibility directly to you." Ethan's words tumbled out in a desperate, breathless rush. "These documents make you the nominal director and personally responsible for $2.3 million in debt." My world tilted sideways. The elegant office, the loving reunion, Amelia's confident embrace, everything suddenly felt like stage props in some elaborate, cruel theater production. "That's impossible," I whispered, shaking my head in disbelief. "She's my daughter, right now. The FBI is searching another one of the company's offices. You have maybe 5 minutes to disappear." Ethan pointed at the documents with a shaking finger. "Look at page 3. There are backdated contracts making you responsible for everything that's happened. All the wire fraud, the money laundering, the securities violations, they all become your crimes the moment you sign." The pages blurred as I struggled to focus, and there it was, buried deep within the dense legal language. Personal liability clauses, financial responsibility transfers, and signature lines that would transform me from a retired engineer into a federal criminal. "She planned this." The words came out as barely a whisper. My own daughter had planned to destroy me. "Amelia's been setting this up for months," Ethan confirmed, glancing nervously toward the door. "The company crisis, the desperate phone call this morning, bringing you here, all of it was choreographed. She could come back any second." My hand trembled as I pulled out my smartphone and began photographing page after page of the documents. The camera's lens captured the corporate letterheads, the backdated signature fields, and the insidious clauses that would have made me liable for crimes I had never even heard of until the previous day. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, my voice thick with shock. "Because I can't stand by and watch an innocent person get framed," Ethan said, moving toward the door to listen for footsteps. "Even if it costs me everything. What will happen when Amelia realizes what you've done? We'll worry about that later. Right now, you need to disappear before the FBI locks down this entire building." Ethan led me through a side door I hadn't noticed before, into a series of service corridors that smelled of industrial cleaning supplies. Emergency lighting cast harsh, unforgiving shadows on the bare concrete walls. Our footsteps echoed loudly in the narrow space. "Take the service elevator down to the parking garage. Then exit on State Street. Not LaSalle." 23 floors of cold metal service stairs stretched below us. My legs, already weak with shock, protested with every downward step. The metal railings felt frigid under my gripping hands. Ethan stayed close, occasionally checking his phone for messages. Amelia will know you helped me, I said, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Maybe, but I'll deal with those consequences. Ethan's voice was filled with a grim determination. What I can't deal with is staying silent while she destroys her own mother. 15 floors, then 10. My breathing grew labored, and sweat mixed with the February chill of the stairwell. Each step took me further away from the trap Amelia had so carefully prepared, and closer to whatever uncertain future came next. If you need testimony, evidence, anything, call me, Ethan said, pressing a business card into my hand. But be careful. Amelia's not finished with you yet. 5 floors. 3. The parking garage level finally appeared through a door marked Emergency Exit Only. Ethan hesitated at the threshold. I have to go back, he said. If Amelia suspects. Thank you. The words felt utterly inadequate for the immense risk he had just taken for me. I won't forget this. Just stay alive, Miss Snyder. That's all the thanks I need. The cold air of State Street hit my face like freedom itself. Pedestrians hurried past me, completely oblivious to the trap I had just narrowly escaped. Behind me, the glass tower stretched toward the gray sky, a monument holding secrets that could have destroyed everything I had built over 68 years of an honest life. My phone buzzed in my pocket. 37 missed calls from Amelia. She knew I had escaped. The frigid air of State Street burned my lungs as I stumbled away from the building, my legs still shaking from the descent down 23 floors of concrete stairs. Behind me, the glass tower loomed against the gray February sky, a silent monolith holding secrets that had almost destroyed me. My phone buzzed. It was Amelia, the first missed call. Miss Snyder? I spun around to see Ethan emerging from the same exit. Breathing hard, sweat visible on his brow despite the cold. He glanced nervously back at the building, then grabbed my elbow. Take these stairs down to the basement. There's an exit that leads out to State Street. What about you? I need to go back up so she won't suspect, Ethan said, his usual military bearing unable to hide the fear in his eyes. Amelia will realize you're gone in minutes. Maybe less. My phone vibrated again in my pocket. Call number 2. How long has this been planned? The question came out broken, defeated. Months. Maybe longer, Ethan replied, checking his watch. Then the building's entrance. Those documents were prepared specifically for you. Backdated signatures. Financial transfers. Everything was designed to make you look like the mastermind behind it all. The weight of her betrayal pressed against my chest like a physical force. While I had been at home worrying about my daughter's business troubles, she had been methodically constructing an elaborate trap designed to completely destroy me. Get to a lawyer, Ethan urged, pressing his business card into my trembling hand. You have the evidence. His personal cell number was handwritten on the back in blue ink. Will you be safe? Safer than you are right now? He said with a laugh that held no humor. Amelia's desperate. She'll try everything. Guilt, threats, manipulation. Don't answer her calls. Phone call 3. Then 4. The vibrations felt like a series of electric shocks against my leg. If this goes to court, I'll testify, Ethan promised, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had made an irreversible decision. I'll tell them everything I know about the document preparation, the timeline, her intentions. I've spent 10 years building this partnership, and now I'm throwing it all away for someone I barely know. Why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because my son is 7 years old, he said, and someday, I want to be able to look him in the eye and know that I did the right thing when it really mattered. The life of downtown Chicago flowed around us business suits, hurrying past, the blare of taxi horns, the urban symphony of a city that never pauses for individual tragedies. We were just 2 people having a conversation on a sidewalk, invisible among millions. Call 5, 6, 7. She's panicking, Ethan said, nodding toward my vibrating phone. That's good. Panic makes people make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind of mistakes that help prosecutors build their cases, he said, extending his hand for a final handshake. Remember, you escaped because you had help from someone inside her own company. That means something to judges and juries. I watched Ethan disappear back into the building through a different entrance, likely preparing to explain his absence with some fabricated errand. The glass doors swallowed him whole, leaving me alone on State Street with a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. Call 8, 9, 10. The crowd carried me along their predetermined paths, a river of people with jobs to reach, meetings to attend, and lives that made sense. I felt like a ghost drifting through their solid world, clutching evidence of crimes I still couldn't fully comprehend. By call 15, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. By call 20, I switched it to silent mode, just watching the screen light up repeatedly, like a beacon of my daughter's desperation. The taxi stand was 2 blocks away. Behind me, the office building grew smaller, but it never disappeared entirely. I knew that somewhere up in that tower, Amelia was discovering that her carefully planned trap had failed, that her mother had escaped with the very evidence that could destroy her instead. Call 25, 26. The screen showed Amelia's name with a relentless, mechanical persistence. My finger hovered over the decline button as her name glowed accusingly on the screen. Call 27. I pressed decline, and immediately, another call came through. 28. The pattern had become a form of psychological torture. Taxi! A yellow cab pulled to the curb, its driver looking at me with an expression of professional concern. My hands shook as I fumbled with the door handle, the morning's adrenaline finally catching up with my 68-year-old body. Where to? He asked. 150 North LaSalle Street, and please, as fast as you can. You okay, ma'am? You look pretty shaken up. Call 29, 30. The phone lit up silently in my lap like some sort of frantic electronic heartbeat. Family troubles, I managed to say. The understatement of the century. Chicago's morning traffic moved with a stubborn slowness through the downtown streets. Each red light felt like an eternity. Each delay another opportunity for Amelia to somehow track me down. The driver offered me water from a bottle he kept up front, and tissues from a box on the dashboard, small kindnesses that felt enormous in my current state. Call 31. I finally decided to check the voicemail. Mom, there's been a misunderstanding. Ethan is confused. Please come back and let's fix this. Her voice sounded so concerned, so loving. The exact same tone she'd used as a child when she had broken something and wanted to avoid being punished. The manipulation was so flawless, it made my stomach turn. Call 33. Another voicemail. You're making a huge mistake. Those documents aren't what he told you. Now. A note of desperation was creeping into her voice, the careful control beginning to crack. Through the taxi's windows, I watched Chicago's neighborhoods pass by like scenes from someone else's life. The engineering firm where I had worked for 30 years, the restaurant where Amelia and I had celebrated her first business contract, the park where I had taught her to throw a baseball. Every landmark was now contaminated by the knowledge of what she had become. Call 35. Voicemail again. I'm your daughter. How can you believe a stranger over your own family? The hypocrisy was breathtaking. She had meticulously planned to frame her own mother for a slate of federal crimes, and now she had the audacity to question my loyalty to family. I pulled out my phone to look at the photos of the documents again, studying them during traffic delays. Even without legal training, I could see my name scattered throughout multiple pages, with signature lines prepared specifically for me, and dates that would make it appear as if I had been involved in decisions I'd never even heard of. You have no idea what kind of trouble you're creating for both of us. Call 37 carried a different tone entirely. The mask was slipping. Beneath the false concern and practiced manipulation lay something colder, more calculating. This was the voice of someone who had spent months plotting my destruction. Frustrated that her target had managed to escape, the taxi turned onto LaSalle Street, approaching the address my old friend, James Peterson, had given me years ago when he'd started his own practice. It was a modest building compared to Amelia's corporate tower. But it represented something that Amelia's world had forgotten entirely. Honest work for honest pay. "This is it," the driver said. I paid him, adding a generous tip for his patience and concern. "Take care of yourself, ma'am. Whatever's happening, I hope it all works out." Call 37 had been the last one. My phone finally fell silent as I stood before the law office building, looking up at windows that promised a sanctuary from the electronic harassment. 37 calls in 90 minutes. It was mathematical proof of Amelia's desperation. The building directory showed James Peterson, attorney at law, on the 7th floor. As the elevator climbed, I tried to organize the chaos in my mind. How do you explain to a friend that your own daughter has become a monster? How do you ask for help when the enemy shares your name and your blood? The elevator dinged softly at the 7th floor. Down the hallway, behind a door, marked with modest lettering, waited answers I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. The law office smelled of leather-bound books and strong coffee, familiar scents from a world where words had precise meanings, and justice still existed as more than just an abstract concept. James Peterson looked up from his desk, his weathered face creasing with concern as he took in my disheveled appearance. "Margaret, this is far more serious than it seems." We had been friends for 40 years, but I had never seen James wear an expression quite like this, a mixture of professional outrage and deep personal protectiveness. The photos of the documents glowed on his computer screen. The legal language that had seemed so confusing, now rendered deadly clear by his expertise. "How much more serious?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "If you had signed those papers, Margaret, you would have become personally responsible for all company debts and all criminal charges. We're talking 15 to 20 years in a federal prison." The number hit me like another physical blow. 20 years. At 68 years old. That meant I would die behind bars for crimes I had never committed, destroyed by the very daughter I had raised. To value honesty above all else. "Your daughter used backdated contracts," James explained, his finger tracing lines of text on his screen. "This means that legally, you would have become a co-owner of the company starting last year." He showed me clauses that would have retroactively made me appear responsible for decisions made while I was sitting at home reading newspapers in my purse's living room. "She's been planning this for months. Based on these dates and the sophistication of these documents, yes, this is not something you create overnight." James leaned back in his chair, a palpable anger radiating from his posture. "Margaret, in 30 years of practicing law, this is the most cynical, cold-blooded manipulation I have ever encountered." The coffee cup in my hands grew cold as James explained the technical mechanisms Amelia had prepared. There were personal guarantees that would have made my house and my life savings liable for all the company's debts. There were corporate structure changes that would have positioned me as the primary decision-maker for all the wire fraud, money laundering, and securities violations. "The federal prosecutors would have seen you as the mastermind," he continued. "An experienced, retired engineer using her technical knowledge to commit sophisticated financial crimes." "But I don't know the first thing about financial crimes," I protested. "That wouldn't have mattered," he said grimly. "These documents create a perfect paper trail showing months of your supposed involvement. Your signature would have validated everything retroactively." James pulled up the federal sentencing guidelines on another screen, showing me the cold, mathematical reality of white-collar crime punishment. The numbers were merciless. Financial fraud carried mandatory minimum sentences that didn't bend for age, or confusion, or family manipulation. What about the $2.3 million in debt? Personal liability. They would have taken your house, your savings, your pension, everything. James's voice carried the heavy weight of legal certainty. Your daughter engineered your complete financial and criminal destruction. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was Amelia again, but James held up his hand. Don't read it. From now on, all communication goes through me. You're not just a victim anymore, Margaret. You're a witness to attempted fraud. The shift in terminology felt significant. Victim implied helplessness. Witness implied power. What do we do now? I asked. We go on the offensive, he declared. We file a criminal complaint against Amelia for attempted fraud. We file a civil lawsuit for attempted financial destruction. And we get a restraining order based on harassment. 37 phone calls absolutely constitutes stalking under Illinois law. James's transformation from concerned friend to aggressive advocate was complete. This was no longer just legal advice. It was war planning. The FBI is already investigating the company's financial crimes, he added. When we present this evidence to them, it changes their entire case. Instead of your daughter being just another defendant, she becomes their primary target. Will Ethan Cole be safe? I asked, a pang of worry for the man who had risked everything for me. We'll make sure of it. His testimony is crucial, and witness protection protocols exist for exactly these situations. James began organizing documents, creating files, and building the foundation for what he clearly saw as a winnable battle. His certainty helped to quiet the chaos in my mind, replacing the panic with something I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Hope. One more thing, Margaret, James said as I prepared to leave. When this goes to court, and it will go to court, juries hate family betrayal more than almost any other crime. What your daughter attempted doesn't just violate federal law. It violates every basic human decency. I stood to leave, feeling steadier than I had since the previous evening. The documents that had almost destroyed me were now the very weapons of my defense. The daughter who had planned my ruin had instead provided irrefutable evidence of her own crimes. The elevator doors opened as I reached for the call button, but my phone rang before I could step inside. It wasn't Amelia this time. It was an unknown number I didn't recognize. My finger hovered over the screen, uncertain whether this was salvation or just a new form of danger. The taxi pulled into my driveway at 6:20 p.m., and my heart sank. Amelia's BMW was parked there like a predator waiting for its prey, its chrome bumper reflecting the streetlights that had just flickered on. She had been waiting, planning this ambush while I was meeting with James, while I was learning the full, horrifying scope of her betrayal. Keep the meter running, I told the driver, but then I reconsidered. This needed to end tonight. Amelia emerged from her car as I paid the fare, moving toward me with a false sense of urgency. I noticed 3 cigarette butts crushed on the pavement near her feet. Unusual for her. A clear sign of how badly her world was unraveling. Mom, finally, I've been calling you all day. Her appearance shocked me. Her shirt was wrinkled, her face was unshaven, and there were dark circles under eyes that had once sparkled with ambition. The successful, polished businesswoman from this morning had been replaced by someone desperate and dangerous. Where have you been? Why won't you answer my calls? I know about your plan, Amelia. The words stopped her mid-stride. Her facade of false concern flickered like a broken neon sign, replaced by something calculating and cold. What plan? I was trying to save you. Save me? My voice was strong, reinforced by the consultation with James. You wanted to make me your scapegoat. That's not. Ethan doesn't understand the business. He's lying to you. Amelia's panic was beginning to leak through her attempted control. I'm your daughter. How can you believe strangers over me? Curtains twitched in the windows of nearby houses. The Henderson family across the street pretended to check their mailbox while obviously listening in. Our family's destruction was becoming suburban entertainment. 15 to 20 years in prison, Amelia. That's what you had planned for me. Her face went white. The specific knowledge of the sentence meant I had talked to lawyers. It meant her manipulation had completely and utterly failed. "You ungrateful old woman." The mask finally slipped away entirely. "I built everything. You could have just taken the fall. You're old anyway." "The daughter I raised is gone," I said, my voice steady despite the pain. "I don't know who you are." Amelia's fist slammed into the hood of her BMW, denting the expensive metal. The sharp sound echoed through the quiet suburban evening like a gunshot. "You think you're so righteous?" Her voice rose to a shout that carried to every house on the block. "You lived your small, pathetic life while I created an empire. And when I needed your help, what did you do?" "Nothing. I raised you to be honest," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and grief. "To build things that last. To care about people more than profit. Honesty?" Amelia laughed, a sound completely devoid of any warmth. "Honesty gets you a pension and a falling-apart house in Evanston. I chose success. You chose to destroy your own mother." The words hung in the cold February air between us. Behind those words lay 37 phone calls, months of meticulous planning, and a stack of documents designed to steal my freedom and my life. Behind them lay every loving moment we had ever shared, now revealed as nothing more than preparation for the ultimate betrayal. "I don't need a mother who won't help her own daughter." Amelia's voice cracked with a toxic mixture of rage and desperation. "You want to play the victim? Fine. Play the victim in court. Play the victim to your lawyer friends, but don't expect me to pretend I still care." "I never expected you to care," I said quietly. "Not after this morning." Amelia moved toward her car, then spun back for one final, venomous blow. "Forget the word mom. To me, you're just Margaret now." The BMW's engine roared to life with an unnecessary aggression. Tires screeched against the asphalt as she reversed out of my driveway, leaving angry black marks on the concrete I had sealed myself just last spring. The sound faded into Chicago's urban hum, carrying with it the last remnants of whatever relationship we had once had. I stood alone in my driveway, my house key clutched in my trembling hand, surrounded by the wreckage of a family that had taken 42 years to build and one single morning to destroy completely. The front door felt heavier than usual as I pushed it open and stepped back into the sanctuary of my home. The months that passed between that February evening and the trial in May moved with the slow, grinding pace of federal justice. The FBI completed their investigation, ultimately finding even more financial irregularities than they had initially discovered. I testified twice before grand juries, worked closely with James on our legal strategy, and watched from a distance as Amelia's world crumbled. Her company collapsed, all of her assets were frozen, and her former business associates distanced themselves from her as if she carried a contagious disease. May 20th arrived with the undeniable weight of finality. The federal courthouse for the Northern District of Illinois stood like a monument to justice in downtown Chicago. Its massive marble columns reached toward the morning sky, and the American flag hung motionless in the still air. Media vans lined the street. Our story had captured public attention as the ultimate family betrayal. "Local executive tries to frame own mother." The headlines wrote themselves. Inside courtroom 2347, the exact same number as Amelia's office. A coincidence that felt like a stroke of cosmic irony. I took my seat in the gallery. Amelia sat at the defendant's table, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, her hands and feet in shackles. The successful, glamorous businesswoman had been completely erased. Her expensive suit had been replaced by a prison uniform, her confident posture broken by months spent in federal custody. "All rise for the Honorable Judge, Patricia Morrison." Ethan Cole took the witness stand first. His voice shook with emotion, but his purpose was steady. "I could not allow an innocent person to suffer," he said, looking directly at Amelia as he spoke. The defendant spent months preparing documents that would have transferred all criminal liability to her elderly mother. The cross-examination attempted to portray Ethan as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, but the technical evidence was overwhelming. My phone photos appeared on the large courtroom screens document after document, showing the backdated signatures, the personal liability transfers, the corporate structure manipulation, all designed to frame me for crimes I'd never even heard of. When my turn came to testify, I walked to the witness stand on unsteady legs. A 68-year-old woman facing a courtroom full of strangers. To describe how my own daughter had tried to destroy me. She didn't just try to steal my money, I told the judge, my voice clear and strong. She tried to steal my freedom. She tried to steal my final years and give them to the federal prison system. Amelia never once looked at me during my testimony. She just stared down at the table, her shoulders hunched. A broken woman who had gambled everything on manipulation and lost. The prosecutor's closing argument was devastating. The defendant attempted to frame her own mother for her financial crimes, engaged in months of preparation, and showed a complete and utter disregard for the family bonds that should be sacred. The defense attorney's plea for leniency fell flat. How can you possibly defend the indefensible? Amelia Snyder, you are found guilty on all 7 counts of the indictment. Judge Morrison's voice carried the full weight of federal authority. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, securities violations, each count represented another year of Amelia's life, to be measured in concrete and steel. The betrayal of family trust makes this crime particularly heinous. The court hereby sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, plus $5 million in fines and restitution. Amelia's shoulders began to shake. Her head fell into her shackled hands, as reality finally penetrated her narcissistic delusion. 12 years. She was 42. She would emerge at 54, a middle-aged and broken woman. There is no parole in the federal system. She would serve every single day that justice demanded. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions that I didn't answer. James guided me to his car through a throng of cameras and microphones, protecting me from the public spectacle just as he had protected me from legal destruction. "How do you feel about your daughter's sentence?" one of them yelled. I couldn't explain that justice and grief were now occupying the very same space in my heart. The woman who tried to destroy me was also the little girl I had taught to ride a bicycle. The criminal deserved every year of her sentence. But the mother in me still mourned the daughter who had died long before this trial ever began. As we drove away from downtown Chicago toward Evanston, I looked back at the federal courthouse one last time, then faced forward, toward whatever came next. The months after the trial were a blur of practical decisions. I put the Evanston house on the market in June. There were too many painful memories lingering in every room. By July, I had found a small lakeside cottage in Madison, Wisconsin, far enough from Chicago to feel like a new world, but close enough for James to visit. The moving trucks arrived on a sweltering August morning, carrying 40 years of my accumulated life toward an uncertain future. Now, 15 days later, I stood on my new deck, watching the sunrise paint Lake Mendota in brilliant shades of gold and amber. "Morning, Max," I said softly. The rescue dog looked up from his favorite spot near my feet, his tail wagging with the unbridled enthusiasm of someone who had also been given a second chance. We had found each other at the Madison Animal Shelter 3 days after I'd arrived, 2 survivors learning how to trust again. Coffee steamed in the cool morning air as I settled into a wooden chair I had bought from a local craftsman. Simple furniture for a simpler life. The cottage was modest, 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a living room with a fieldstone fireplace, but every inch of it felt like freedom. Madison mornings were quiet in a way Chicago never was. There were no traffic symphonies, no sense of urban urgency, just the gentle sound of lake water lapping against the shore and birds announcing the start of another day. It was a peaceful silence that allowed me to think clearly for the first time in months. Miss Snyder! Mail delivery! The postal carrier, a cheerful woman named Betty, handed me an envelope with familiar handwriting. A letter from Ethan Cole carried news that made me smile for the first time in days. His job search had been successful. He had found a position at a small consulting firm in Minneapolis that valued integrity over connections. Some betrayals teach us who our real friends are, he wrote. You saved my conscience, as much as I helped save you. The lake stretched out toward the horizon, dotted with small fishing boats taking advantage of the perfect August weather. Somewhere across those waters, people were living ordinary lives, their problems measured in mortgage payments and work deadlines, rather than federal indictments and family destruction. Welcome to our little community, Mrs. Henderson from next door approached with a covered casserole, the universal small-town greeting for newcomers. Thank you, I said warmly. It's so quiet here after living in Chicago. That's why we love it, she smiled. Peace and quiet. Friendly neighbors. Simple living. She looked down at Max, who had trotted over for inspection. A rescue dog? Yes, I replied, reaching down to scratch his ears. We rescued each other. 3 months of cottage life had established new routines that felt like a form of healing. Morning walks with Max along the shoreline. Afternoon projects fixing loose shutters or planting a small garden that would bloom next spring. And evening reading in the chair by the fireplace, with books chosen for pleasure, rather than as an escape from trauma. The owner of the local hardware store, a man named Jim Patterson, had become an unofficial advisor for my cottage maintenance. City folk learning country living, he would joke, but his advice was always generous, and his company was always welcome. Garden's looking good, he'd said just yesterday. Your tomatoes should be ready by Labor Day. Simple conversations about simple things. No one here knew about Chicago, about trials, about daughters who become strangers. I was just Margaret, the retired engineer who had moved to the lake for a little peace and quiet. Sometimes I wondered about Amelia, with 12 years stretching ahead of her like an unchangeable sentence. She was in a federal prison somewhere, learning to live within walls and schedules imposed by others. Did she ever think about our last conversation? Did she ever remember being 7 years old, so proud of the birdhouse we had built together in the garage? Probably not. Narcissists don't waste time on regret. Justice had prevailed. Ethan had found new work with honest people, and I had discovered that starting over at 68 was not only possible, but liberating. The money from the sale of the house provided a modest security. James visited monthly, bringing legal updates and the comfort of old friendship. Max stretched in the morning sun, then padded toward the cottage, ready for breakfast. His needs were simple and easily satisfied. We had both learned that love didn't require blood relations. Sometimes, the family you choose proves to be more reliable than the one assigned by genetic accident. Standing to follow him inside, I looked out across Lake Mendota toward the future. At 68, I had discovered I was stronger than I ever knew. Sometimes, the greatest gift of betrayal is learning who you really are when everything else has fallen away. Behind me, the sunrise painted my small cottage in a warm, hopeful light. Ahead, whatever came next was waiting with the gentle patience of lake water against the shore. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.